All right. It's still morning for me. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Good morning, GitOpsians. We are back. I don't know. We didn't actually take a break. It feels like we took a break. It's only been 2 weeks. It's been a very long 2 weeks for me. So hopefully other people haven't had such a long experience. But anyway, we are quick announcements, and then I'll introduce our guest today. So schedule is going live, partly live for QCon EU. And with that, ArgoCon, which is a co-located event. I'm very excited that I have a talk. Andrew Block invited me to do a talk at GitOpsCon, so I'll most likely be joining that unless like some unforeseen thing happens. You should see me there. And then I also am giving a talk as a member of the Code of Conduct Committee for Kubernetes about giving and receiving professional feedback. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. The entire committee is very passionate about. We're really excited to give that. So if you can't be there in person for that in March, watch the recording later because we're hoping that can add a lot of value to everybody's day to day. Other announcements. GitOpsCon North America, which is co-located to Open Source Summit in Seattle. The CFPs for that close on February 4th. So that's 3 days. I'm on the program committee for that this time, which is exciting. So please submit your CFPs so that I can read them. I will not be at that conference though, sorry. And that conference is in April, actually. I don't remember the days, but it's in April sometime. So yeah, that is announcements. Look at me. I rolled through them all without forgetting them. So that brings us to our guest. So our guest today is Blaize Stewart. Blaize very kindly responded to my LinkedIn call out for, hey, can someone come talk to us about video games and stuff? And he was like, yeah. And I'll let Blaize take over the introductions from here.
All right. Hi. I'm obviously the guest here. I'm the unfamiliar face, I'm sure. I'm Blaize Stewart. I was excited to respond to the call. It was just a fun, games, and the context was a little different. It was like, the context was OpenShift and GitOps in the Kubernetes space. I was like, well, I have something that's not exactly traditional gaming in the way that people would probably think about this. I've used gaming as a demo rather than like for all things in Docker and Kubernetes, because I just got sick of Hello World, web apps. So I was like something more interesting than that. So in that space, I've kind of got immersed in this whole thing I'm going to show you today, this Frankenstein's monster. But where I'm coming from, I am my background is pretty diverse. I come out of a lot of different contexts. So I've a background in infrastructure and software development, and of course, got interested in Docker. And when in the early days of Docker, before Kubernetes, it was even really a thing. And then, of course, as everything kind of shifted that way, I got on board with the movement, and been pretty big fanboy of all things Kubernetes. And I spoke at DockerCon a few times in the past, and I've done a lot of content work, and especially in the Microsoft space, because I'm a Microsoft MVP. That's kind of where I focus, is the intersection of software development and apps on Azure. So a lot of open source and a lot of Microsoft, and wherever those two intersect, that's where I'm probably going to be. So it's a little bit about me, but
you also, hang on, you forgot the best part.
Oh, yeah.
You also write books.
I do write books.
You write good books. I have been reading your book. It is very good.
Where is that book? Yeah, here. I got a few. Yeah. I actually have fiction. This is one of my books. I have currently 4 books out. And then my latest book is actually not fiction. It's a tech book, architecting IoT solutions on Azure. So on O'Reilly. So if you want to pick up a copy of that, it's about IoT and a lot of Kubernetes stuff in there. Yeah, but as you mentioned, I'm an author too. I write epic fantasy, and that's what I do for fun. While other people have more interesting hobbies, that's what I do for fun, because it's just something that I really like to do. And so that's something I just use to decompress at the end of a long day. I had to go writing books. Currently, I'm editing one, and it will be out probably second quarter this year, after edits and beta readers and then publishing and all that. So excited about that. So lots of fun there. But yeah, author as well.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. I discovered that you were an author when I clicked on your LinkedIn profile to message you, and I was like, oh, that looks like a book I would read. And then I looked at the the summary a little bit more closely to the beginning of the series. I was like, that is definitely a book I would read. I have been reading it, although a little bit slowly because I've been pressed for free time lately. My hobbies are reading. I do some writing. Obviously haven't pushed through an entire novel though, because I don't know how you do that. And then HEMA, which is swords, and I have a competition coming up, so I've been doing that 4 nights a week. So
Nice.
I've been pretty busy with my swordsmanship. Minor unrelated announcement: our club has joined forces with a on-campus club at UC Berkeley. So I am now a HEMA instructor at UC Berkeley, which is only in return for this practice space, but it's not nothing. It's very cool. So that's a fun thing. If anybody's ever at UC Berkeley and you go around the campus on the weekends, you'll probably see the sword group. Okay, that's enough chit chat about random stuff. I think people actually want to see your cool demos. Are you ready for me to enable the screen share?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of go through this architecture of this thing that I want to show you. This is I want to show you the games, but I want to talk about this too from just the tech stack, so you can kind of nerd out on this a little bit. And of course, everything I'm going to show you is on GitHub, and I'll probably have to drop some links in the chat here to these repos. So that none of this is proprietary tech. It's all open source, and I can't really claim I can't claim that I did a lot of dev in this. Most of what I did was just write glue code to stitch a lot of this stuff together. So you can see that there's a lot of stuff on the screen here. And that's why I wanted to kind of show you this first, so you kind of understand the secret sauce behind everything I'm going to show you in the demos later on, which is just how do you get games from a container to a browser, and how did you do that for whatever game it is that I care about. And that's really what this is all about. Let me just walk through this, and then I'll get those links for you, and we can put those over here. The repos are pretty straightforward. I'll drop this one out here, and you can kind of comb through this. And this is all on GitHub. Oh, where am I at?
So was the motivation really because of Hello World, or was it it's an interest in you have the games, you want to play the games and stuff like that?
No, seriously. Well, there was kind of two things. I just linked that's my GitHub profile. All these, if you go through here, I'm going to show you 3 different things. They're all named Docker Kimu or Docker DOSBox or Docker RetroArch. And they're one of my many repositories. But what got me into this was literally kind of a roundabout way. I wanted literally, I was just so sick of doing Hello World demos in Docker, because this is early days of Docker. I wanted something that was a lot more than that, something that was more substantive, something that could spin up quickly, but would also have a little bit more just appeal than Hello World or simple trivial app. This was to just show you that this is a very capable technology. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. And so I put together an earlier version of what I'm going to show you today, but it was the same essential thing. So yeah, that's my GitHub profile, and then all this code is under that. So there's several repositories that kind of all implement the same thing, but variations of it. In any case, and I put together the original, which was basically just the UI component of this. I added sound later, which was a lot harder to figure out, but adding the UI to it was actually pretty straightforward. And so I was like, well, I could probably put something like DOSBox under this and use DOSBox for demos. And DOSBox is because for old school DOS games, which that was pretty much my childhood. So I played a lot of PC games on DOS platform, 46, 286, whatever I had at the time. And so it was just a fun way to nerd out and be nostalgic about it. And then it kind of grew in its implementation from not just doing DOS games, but I was like, well, you could probably use this for other things like I don't know, maybe you could run like wine apps and then take an app, put wine around it, and then put it into the same stack here, and then have like GUI apps inside of a browser, like a desktop app in a browser served up by way of Docker. And then I've done some pretty crazy crap with this. I've actually put like entire operating systems inside of containers without privilege mode, and actually I'm going to demo one of those today just because it's kind of fun. But anyway, let's talk about this stack here for a second. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. No, you did good.
Now this stack here is kind of two things that I wanted to focus on, and that's mostly kind of this middleware right here, where there's this kind of sound layer right here, and then there's this this UI layer. Because I wanted to pitch this for context, mostly because you could get lost in the weeds if you looked at my code on this. The Docker files are not trivial, but I'm not like they're not like super complicated. But if you're looking at it, you're going like, what is that? What is it? What's it talking about? And so I wanted to show you this so that when we look at the code, that this will make sense. So basically, this is just using under the hood. It's using some kind of UI, basically some kind of X Windows system. So X11 with some kind of window manager. I'm using Rat Poison because it's chromeless. It doesn't have any borders on it, and it's really light. And so you could put KDE, XFCE, any of those as part of this. I use Rat Poison. Then that allows you to have a window manager. Then you can then drop whatever app you want into that. And in this case, I'm actually using RetroArch or DOSBox or some other emulator to run the games. So that's really the easy part of this, that getting X11 installed and putting some kind of window manager on top of that and putting an app, that's pretty straightforward. Now the trick to this whole thing was like, how do I make this headless in a way that I can then make it headless and also stream the results back to a browser in a way that's going to be expedient, to have enough performance, if you will, to play games with it and have where it's not dropping frames or doing shearing and all that. And that's really where this stack came in handy for the UI. And that's where, so to implement that, I went to Virtual GL, which is basically OpenGL implemented using basically a virtual sound video card in a way, or it can also tap into an actual open GL implementation in a Linux context, and it can grab output from that. And then Turbo VNC is works on top of OpenGL, Virtual GL, to take the output from Virtual GL and then encapsulate that in the VNC protocol, and it takes care of a lot of the problems with like streaming that back to the results, just that so you don't end up with like shearing, and it also does a lot of compression on it, or optimizes the compression and all the streaming and all that for you, so you end up with a really good experience in terms of the animation being really smooth and not dropping frames and shearing and doing all that kind of nonsense that you would otherwise get if you just use standard VNC. Now, to make that work on top of to make that work in the browser, of course, you need something to kind of make that TCP stream converted to something that a browser can understand, and that's where WebSoxify comes in. It's just an open source project that takes any standard TCP stream and wraps it up in WebSockets, and then that means that you can then work with it in the browser context. And the client is based on NoVNC, which is just an open source implementation of the VNC protocol that runs in a browser. It's pure JavaScript, pure HTML, CSS, all that kind of good stuff. So there's no plugins or anything like that. It's just pure browser technology. And so all that gets served up to the browser, just static content, and it connects back into the stack down here. And it as using the VNC protocol, but it's all brokered by way of WebSockets. Now, over here on the left, we have the audio stack, and this took me a while to figure out. It wasn't in my first implementations of it, but it's still not perfect. There's still some idiosyncrasies about it, but still, to get this to work, I needed some kind of audio output, but you need to do that again without a sound card, a physical sound card. So that's why you have Pulse Audio working with GStreamer. And in similar way that Virtual GL gives you like a virtual graphics card without needing an actual monitor and output. It gives you just an output stream. GStreamer can tap into via Pulse Audio and then take the audio output from Pulse Audio, and then stream it as TCP. And then from that, you can wrap that up inside of a WebSocket and WebSockify again there, and then interact with that through a browser client. And so in much the same way, we just had to get this to work right here in the browser client. So there's some additional JavaScript code that I inject into the stock no VNC experience, and then I use Nginx as just a proxy layer, because rather than have 2 ports exposed, I just used Nginx as a reverse proxy back into these 2 different stacks, and then give them 2 different endpoints, because it's literally 2 independent stacks in the container that we're running all this in. So that's the stack. Throwing that out there just so that when we do look at the code, I do want to look at that. It's not mud. It's not just, oh, what's he using Nginx for? Why is he using whatever, Pulse Audio or GStream or WebSockify? Just to kind of cover the basis there. But I do want to do the first demo, which I'm going to launch one of these games just so you can kind of see what it's like. And then we'll go look at a Docker file. Then I'll show you some other ways that I've implemented this. So again, all this stuff in repos on GitHub. So let me launch a command line here and get WSL up here. I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux. There's nothing about Windows Subsystem for Linux that there's no special sauce there. You could definitely use any version of Linux as long as you run Docker. This will work. It's not. I'm just using WSL because I live in a Microsoft world, so I'm going to be using something in the Microsoft camp that's going to be I can't spell source. That's going to be Linux oriented. So the first one I'm going to show you is the DOS box implementation, and this one is just a fairly straightforward implementation of this particular project, if you will. And this one is using DOSBox with that stack I just showed you. So the DOSBox is running as the emulator for running old games. And this was my first pass at this, was all based on DOSBox. I kind of set it all up using DOSBox, and I didn't have all the other ones figured out yet. I didn't figure out RetroArch or any of these other ones out there. I just used kind of a straight up DOSBox experience, and that was it. But I revisited it multiple times over the years, and I've built on it just for fun. So this one, I'm going to do a Docker run. I'm going to do Docker images to make sure I can remember the image name, because I built all these yesterday. Let me get a root here. And let me get back to this folder here. I didn't mount the Docker context in the user. So let's use Docker images. Make sure that I'm remember the image name. Here I rebuilt all these just to make sure they still built yesterday, and there it is, Blaize DOS game. So I'm going to do Docker run -p, and then I'm going to do 8080, and I'm just doing a Docker run command. I'm not doing any kind of Kubernetes or anything right here. All this works in Kubernetes, though. I've used it in Kubernetes and used it in OpenShift or AKS on Azure. I've run it in container apps on Azure and ACI in Azure. I've put this on Raspberry Pis. I've done all kinds of crazy stuff with it. So it works in all those different contexts. This one I'm just running in a local Docker context, and you can see that it's spitting out stuff on the CLI, just showing me the state. That's really not the whiz bang of the whole thing, and that's all going to be done in a browser right here. So let me bring a tab over here and then pull this guy up. And so it's up and running. It's listing a directory of files here. It's just the root, and vnc.html is the client one. And if I pull this up, the password is baked into the Docker file. I'll show you that in a minute. It's already launched DOSBox, and I'm going to install this game. And if you're a nostalgia nerd, you'll probably recognize, something that looks like an old DOS installer. Except this one is not running on a where's my cursor here? There it is. This is not running in a 46. Obviously, this is running in a container that I just launched, and now I'm connected to it through a browser using VNC. So if I run the game, I should get beeps and boops of a 16-bit DOS game that came out in 1990, so 34 years ago. And so it just makes all the fun. Can you guys hear the sound coming through?
No, we can't, but I believe you.
Oh, bummer, because that's half the fun is the sound. But yeah, and so yeah, it enables me to stream the results back to a browser and just play this using keyboard, mouse, context, and everything works just fine using this. So I recently gave this demo to a customer, and they loved it, and they used it for symposiums and in front of thousands of people. And it was fun because they liked the nostalgia of the old DOS game running in this one. It's not as gory as what it could be. I did set up Doom on this one.
Yeah, I saw that. I was surprised you went with
I
Keen.
was like, there's Doom, and like, I mean, I was happy to see Commander Keen. I haven't seen that forever.
Commander Keen. This one takes a little bit longer to install because it is such a larger game, and then this being a DOS emulator, it's actually throttling everything to run at an appropriate speed for DOS based application. So the decompression is actually happening as it would on a 46, I guess, or whatever. Although the storage does seem to be a little bit better than what you get if you're running this off a floppy disk, obviously. So this one does take a minute to install. But surprisingly, it's not as big as I remember it being. I remember this game taking up like tons of space on a drive.
Yeah.
I guess back in the early 90s, whatever, I guess 10 megabytes was huge. But now that hardly seems. I mean, I've downloaded web pages that are larger than that. Yeah, so let's run through the setup here and save and launch Doom. And this one does have sound to it. I'm sorry that it's not coming through, but it's actually really, really playable. I was the first time I ever pulled this up and started playing it. I was kind of blown away, like actually how well this ran. And
yes,
like no frame drops or moment over bad guys back like I did when I was like in high school or whatever. It just
this makes me so happy.
So yeah,
I can't even. This just makes me so happy.
If you need some stress relief, here you go. All right,
this is it.
You can put Wolfenstein on here and blow away Nazis, which is you could definitely do things like that or things like that. So yeah, DOS games, any of them would work on this. If it ran on DOS, it'll work in DOSBox, and because it's running in DOSBox, you can stream it back to a browser, and everything is working just fine. So it's surprisingly playable. It's I was surprised at like how well it streamed. Now, so the frame rate, I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's good. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure like how it looks.
So like that's a thumbs up.
I'm not sure how that's coming through on the stream. I'm just saying the stream is pretty decent locally, and then if you play it even like over the internet, it actually runs really well there too. So yeah. I've played these like hosted on Azure locally on my my box here. So again, really a fun way just to play with Docker and use it for something that's not productive. So
it was super smooth from our perspective, like
and it does have sound. I'm sorry the sound's not coming through, but it does play the boops and boops and the shooting the alien monsters, whatever. So let's go look at the Docker file for this, and then I'm going to do 2 more demos. I'm going to demo in the same context, but more nostalgia for sure. If you're not a PC gamer, you'll still get to appreciate it. So let me walk through the Docker file for this. Let's see what I got here. Is this it? This is the one that we just looked at. They all kind of look the same. The biggest difference is which emulator am I using? What platform am I trying to host as for nostalgia? What am I using for like that core experience? And so this one is using DOSBox, obviously. So this being Docker, all this magic happens inside of a Docker file. So this is where all the build happens. So based on Ubuntu 22.04, I've never really tested this on any other distro because I've never really had a need to build it outside of a demo. So no one ever asked me to build it in Red Hat or build it on like, gosh, my brain is not working today. Debian or any other kind of demo other than using just Ubuntu. So I've pretty much stuck with that one. I guess you could build that on Alpine or something more minimal, but this one works fine too.
Mhm.
There's the super secure password there. I'm embedding a password in a Docker file. So like I said, don't use this for production, or you could pass in an environment variable and override that. Sure. There's probably ways to mitigate that. This is just doing a bunch of the package installation. It's pretty much the same for all of these, minus the stuff that's specific to the platform I'm installing. And so DOSBox is the one I'm using, but you can see that it's installing stuff that's very commonly used for X11 software. So X11 stuff of using Pulse Audio, using Nginx for the proxy. I've mentioned that already. Yeah, my production Doom instance. There you go. Fantastic. It's just a bunch of utilityware that this needs to run. And then this right here copies some pre-configured stuff for Nginx. So I had to pre-configure Nginx to basically run this, and that's so that I could set up that proxy appropriately. So that's just hard coded in that Nginx file. After installing it, I just inject a Nginx into config file into Nginx, and then that works fine. This is the client side audio, and there's more on that later, but it's right here. And basically, this is just receives the audio stream and then plays it back through the speaker locally. It's just JavaScript to do that. And this is the code that kind of reconfigures the VNC client to have that audio stream received, and then it starts that audio stream once the client launches and connects to the backend server, which in this case is of course a container. This right here is installing our virtual GL. It's just using deb packages, so those work on Ubuntu because it's Debian based. I suspect that would work for of course Debian proper, and then there's also RPMs available for Red Hat if you want to go that route and reconfigure this for Red Hat. This right here is just configuring the DOSBox component of this, so it's just setting up DOSBox and making all that work. This is also setting up Rat Poison too. Rat Poison is, I think there's a link in that already. It's supposed to be a keyboard oriented desktop manager. I'm using it because it doesn't have any Chrome. It's really light. It's just a no nonsense experience for running a window manager on top of X11, and then it just bootstraps the whole application. So install Rat Poison, then configure Rat Poison to launch DOSBox. And then this copies the games, which of course are Commander Keen and Doom. You can put whatever game you want to in there, or you can mount a virtual folder into a volume into the container, use Kubernetes storage solutions, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's as long as the game shows up on the file system, that's all you need. I'm just copying them into this as part of the build because Commander Keen and Doom and the instances that I'm distributing them in is free or shareware, so I'm not breaking any laws. It's not open source, but it's still shareware, so I'm not technically against doing anything illegal there. And then this is just configuring everything as far as the Docker file goes to expose it. I'm using supervisor D because there was just no way I could get all the configuration on a single entry point or a single line of execution. So I configured supervisor D just to bootstrap all the parts, and that's bringing up Nginx and WebSockify and Pulse and GStreamer and no VNC and WebSockify again, and all the Rat Poison and all the other stuff that you need to make all this work according to that architecture. So that's the Docker file, and that's probably the most complicated thing about this whole thing. So this again is just me hacking the Docker file and figuring out all this stuff. And once I got it working for like DOSBox, making it work in other contexts was actually really easy because like the hard stuff was figuring out the audio stack and to a lesser degree figuring out the video stack, and the rest of it was just how do I make this run in this context, and that was pretty straightforward. So any questions about this so far? Any comments, confessions?
Confessions, I love that. I actually have to admit, like, I wasn't familiar with Supervisor D until like right this moment. I've been like quietly Googling in the background, right?
Oh, if you've never used it in Docker, it's not appropriate for everything. But if you have a Docker file that is complex and you have a lot of stuff you need to start at boot, and you don't, it's actually a really nice solution. It monitors the processes that you start with Supervisor D. If there's a stop start scenario, it'll restart the process and things like that. So it gives you a lot of configurability around the ability to use different daemons that you might need running, as part of your software in a Docker container. It's not for everything, but I use it quite a bit for complex stuff like this. So it's pretty popular. It's not like super popular in the Docker context, but I mean, it's certainly not trivial, not like an obscure, no one ever used it before thing. So something to check out if you've never seen it before. So
yeah, I've been trying to keep a running stream of like the open source projects you're mentioning, like throwing them into the
there's a ton of them.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, Johnny's writing a to-do note. It's exactly what's happening. I already have it up. It's on my other.
Definitely check it out. It's a really cool project. I have used it on a number of things, but this one, it just was like, oh my gosh, it simplified so many things when I started using it. Because after adding, like for the video stack, that was okay. I can manage that with just like a script and using my entry point. But can you do it, exemplify a real world use case for supervised D? I'm guessing that's in reference to. Well, I've used it where I've had a lot of like smaller like daemons that have been running in my my application and my Docker file. So if I have like I don't know, some kind of like site, like I'm gonna call sidecar, that's a Kubernetes thing. But if I had like some kind of logging component, and there was also some kind of like agent that I needed in my container, and I had some kind of like other small little agents that I'm sticking into my containers, like I don't know, that's some things that are streaming telemetry or instrumentation out, things like that, where you have like smaller components of your applications that might not be your core application, but you want to include those in your container for like monitoring or other supporting roles, like a lot of the stuff that I have going on here. That would be one use case for it. Another one is if you have like a complex, like into your application, like kind of like this is, where you have different stacks that you have to start in the same container, where you're using something like Nginx, but underneath that you're exposing some kind of software that is not necessarily built for Nginx. It's got its kind of own internal web hosting thing, and you need to put something that's a little bit more secure or a little bit more robust in front of it. Something like Nginx in front of a more built-in web server or something like that. That's not necessarily something that's got strict integration with like Nginx or something like that. It's really good for those kinds of use cases. A lot of the times I've used it is just more for that, like those smaller like daemons that you have running in your container that are more there for supporting roles, but not actually a main part of your application. Does that make sense?
Fiddly bits.
Say what?
It's for the fiddly bits.
The fiddly bits. There you go. That's a good word. But for this solution, it was absolutely essential, because this is, again, just a Frankenstein's monster, just all sorts of open source projects. So it took a little bit to kind of stitch all that together. So let's do another demo. Let's I'm gonna do RetroArch now. If you're familiar with that, RetroArch is an open source platform for bootstrapping all kinds of different platforms. You can even bootstrap DOSBox with it. I like to do DOSBox separately because it's a little cleaner, but RetroArch gets you all those old school consoles that you might have had when you were a kid. So let's play with that one for a little bit. So let me kill this one, and let me start this let's do this. Let's do RetroArch Docker. There we go. This one I have a ROMs folder that I want to bring up right here, and in this ROMs I have Mario Kart. That's the game I'm going to demo. But this one is pretty straightforward. It looks a lot like the other one did. For our It looks a lot like the other one did. I just want to bring up this one using a command that I don't feel like typing it all in. I actually I just have a copy and paste command. This one is just exposing port 8080 to port 40 or port 80, and then I'm doing a volume mount right here to a ROMs folder that's local, and then I'm mounting, and then I'm going to call it Blaize RetroArch, and that's the container image. And this is going to start something. It's going to start something in the background. It's instead of booting up DOSBox, it's going to boot up RetroArch. So to show you what RetroArch looks like, let me refresh this, and it's kind of ugly when you start it up. Let me scroll up. Let me zoom out here. There we go. It's kind of ugly when it starts up. That's because just the base install of this from the package manager doesn't have any of the content. So you have to kind of come down here and run a first. You have to run an updater on it. So, okay, update the assets. And it'll restart it. And everything looks better. And then you can do update the core files, and then this actually downloads all like the metadata for all the platforms it supports. From this, you can kind of like go back in here. You can go to load core, and you can download a core. And this, you can see that it just supports just stuff I've never even heard of. I don't even know what an Armstad is. I've heard of like some of this stuff, but Armstad, I've heard of Atari 2600, 7800s, 5200s. Atari Lynx, and some of these old stuff like Commodore 64. That was my first computer. So it supports a ton of different things. So you can see it's DOSBox. It's got NES. It's got NEC, like 3DS, N64, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. I mean, just tons and tons and tons of these systems in here. I'm going to install SNES because that's like from my childhood. I had a SNES for a minute, and my favorite game was Mario Kart. So that's the one I'm going to play. And so to load that up, you just go to load content, and I'm going to go down to ROMs down here, and see if I have my ROMs. And there's my ROMs, my ROM, and then you launch the ROM. And just like before, this is just pure.
Oh, we lost your audio actually.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we lost your audio for a second there.
Oh, you did. Can you hear now?
Yeah.
I was like, this is pure bliss. I wish you could hear the audio from the game. It's playing in my ear. But again, very playable here. This is 16-bit glory, early 90s stuff. So, third grade, I think, for me.
This is so awesome.
Fourth grade. So again, buttery smooth, very playable, and streaming the results. It's surprising. The first time I ever ran this particular emulator, I was like blown away like how well it actually ran. It was like I thought I would have to like tweak and make it run well, but I've literally like it just started up and it just started working. And I'm like, I don't have to do anything. This runs better than it does like when I run it locally in other ways. So yeah, very playable. Lots of frame rate, decent frame rates, no skewing or anything like that. And this down. So yeah, very fun. If you like this, if you like old SNES games, if you played Street Fighter or you played other games like that, that's a one that you can do with it. This as well. So Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat on the Sega.
I was just saying. I wasn't going to say it. I was going to hold off because that was my game.
Fun.
Yeah,
love that game.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat would work on this. Anything in like you could get to like Mario World 64, or Mario World or whatever. You could get the original Mario Brothers if that's your gig, or you can play old Atari games.
So
if that's your gig.
I love that you mentioned the Atari a couple times. This box over here is my husband's Atari.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
Which one is it? 5600 or 72 or 26?
I'm not sure.
Can tell.
I can't. It's like it's just in a box, right? I'd have to go like there's a drill, and my Gambit action figure got knocked over, and he like
oh no
fell to pieces, and he's all on top of it, and I have to get him put back together. He's meant to come apart. Like that sounds terrible. He's meant to come apart. But I haven't had a chance to kind of do it. Also, his face is missing. That's a whole thing.
Oh, no.
It's one of those that you can change the facial expressions. So I just
nice.
I can't get in there. Like we'll find. I'll tell you later which Atari it is because I don't remember. And then upstairs I'm the console gamer, so I have like the PlayStation 1. I have a working Nintendo 64.
Nice.
It's the Pikachu one. I have PlayStation.
GameCube or?
I do have a GameCube. Yes, I've got a GameCube. I've got every PlayStation except for the PlayStation 4 because I gave it away because the PlayStation 5 plays the 4 games, and
Nice. Okay.
that was just a redundancy I didn't need. I have multiple types of Game Boys, PlayStation Portable, Switches. Like we got kind of whatever.
Adventure for 2600. Oh my gosh, I love that game. That was so fun.
I'm kind of like, I might go rummaging through this box very carefully while Blaize is talking and find out these answers.
Yeah, like Adventure, like for the 2600 was like this labyrinth game you would navigate and you try to avoid this like duck-looking dragon. I guess it was. It was so like bad it was amazing type game.
Yeah.
But there of course it wasn't. You had Pac-Man and River Raid and tons of other games like that. I 2600 was I'd never had one. My grandma had one, and I played it every time I went to her house. So that was my memories from when I was a child there. She had like 3 of them, I think. She had like 3 Ataris and 3 TVs, and all the grandkids would kind of.
Oh wow, you had the cool grandma.
Yeah, we had the cool grandma. She bought them all like yard sales, and then I was able to get yeah. So yeah, it was fun.
Ready Player One references. I don't get pop culture references. Even if I've seen the thing or read the book, I don't hold these things in my head at all. So like my husband will make pop culture references all the time. And usually the things I've introduced him to thinking that I will understand it, I'll be like, what are you talking about? It's I guess the way I am, my brain doesn't do that. I'm sorry. Every pop culture reference will always go over my head. Let's just say it's an adorable quirk.
I'm so oblivious to pop culture that it would go over my head too. So because I am the furthest thing from like a pop culture aficionado because I live in a world of like computers and fantasy novels, and so
me too.
like my entire world is pretty much just a one that I either it's coming through my screens as code or it's something that I'm making up in my head. So that's my summary of my existence, right? So.
I have teenage kids, so I'm pretty much like I'm in the loop on all the craziness that kids are going through, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I can say that my girls probably are not going to be that way because they're kind of tracking along that more like nerd stereotype, like after their old man.
My 13-year-old child is currently attempting to build a Five Nights at Freddy animatronic.
Oh, nice.
That's what's happening in my house right now. Send robotics parts, please, because this kid's making me go broke.
Oh man, I'm gonna do one more demo, and this one is just because this kind of came out of left field one day. I was just thinking about like, is it possible to like run VMs in containers? Mm-hmm. I know that sounds like so counterintuitive. Like, why the hell would you do that? But there is this like one thing that I had kind of like in my brain, like maybe there's like this extreme edge case where you could justify this. And
we actually see it a lot. Believe it or not, we actually see it a lot. A lot of our customers do this.
To me, it's absolutely like against everything that you ever learned about containers to do this. But to say that I'm going to suggest you do this for anything is, don't quote me, but there is this one edge case. Like if you just run out of options and you just can't do nested virtualization and you want to be able to like run applications in Windows applications, that is, in a container, but you don't want to use Windows containers, then this might be a way to do that. If you can get past all the security implications and all the other problems with it.
We see it in systems that are too legacy to be worth migrating.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of like an in-between step over the like kind of the rewrite and the re-architecture. But like it makes it easier for like the bits to kind of like talk. Like we'll see stuff like that. The edge cases are always very like weird and very like particular.
Absolutely. And this is like one of those things I would kind of throw in that bucket of just like, yes, you can do this.
Yep.
Is this one of those things you would do for anything? Like anybody in their right mind would, like, if you, again, last resort, maybe, but even then I'm kind of like hesitant to say, yeah, this is a good idea. I would probably like suggest nested virtualization or something along those lines versus doing this, but because like you can do it, because you can do it, I just did it. So why not? And so I'm gonna launch. Not that's the wrong command. I'm gonna start this particular one. I'm gonna launch Windows XP in a container, and this one is just it's gonna launch the same stack, but instead of using RetroArch, you're using DOSBox. This is going to use Kimu. So Kimu is again another open source project for doing virtualization, and Kimu is the one that's more native Linux kernel mode virtualization, but you can also use it in user mode, which means that you can actually run a full blown x86 VM in user mode. It's terribly slow, but for old stuff that doesn't matter. So it works fine. If it was like Windows XP, that's okay. If it was like Windows 11 or Windows 10, good luck. I did put Mac OS in a container, and but you have to use privilege mode to do that. But it actually did work, kinda. Was very kludgy and crashed after about 5 minutes. But hey, at least you could get it to boot, right?
Oh man, that's like have you ever done Hackintosh?
Yeah, it's a Hackintosh. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It is a Hackintosh in a container, and there's an entire project out there that's about containerizing Mac OS, and I was kind of blown away like how much effort people have put into that, because to me it just doesn't seem like anything anybody in their right mind would do, but who else would? But then again, who else would put XP in a container too?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the internet. There's something for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It was funny because I was talking. I recently did a tech refresh, right? And so I have my first laptop Red Hat sent me. I imaged myself, right? So this new laptop I got a corporate standard build, and I was like,
nice.
oh, some of the stuff is running. It actually did a software update. Now it's all running fine. But initially, like first boot, some of the stuff was running a little buggy. And my friend, he says you should have gotten a Mac. This friend has probably listened to my 15-minute soapbox why I will never, ever, ever use Mac unless I have to, and you better pay me a lot of money to do it. Like, he knew what he was doing. And it's not that... No, it's that I hate it. It's that I legitimately hate it. I hate everything about Xcode. I hate
Xcode. Xcode is a pile. I don't like working in Xcode, and I will like, I'm, there's I don't know whose nightmare that was when they came up with it, but I'm not a fan of Xcode, and generally speaking, not a fan of writing software on a Mac either. But
yeah,
but
for me, it's that if I want to download Python, I have to, or if I want to have Python, right, I have to have all of their Xcode suite and everything they think I need with that. And it's like, it's so opinionated about that situation. And I'm like, could we not though? Could I just not? And could I only have what I want to have and what I need to have? That's it for me. Also, there was something a while ago. Whatever. There was something a while ago about Mac was actually scanning your networks, or Apple was scanning the networks off the computers and collecting the MAC addresses of the devices on your network, and then like streaming that back and storing it. And I was like, why would you do that?
Why would you do that? Yeah.
Why would you do that? And I was like, and I saw that article. It came out, and that was the day we got rid of all of our devices.
I don't have any Apple devices, but I'm not trying to hate on Apple. I went like into the Apple ecosystem and then departed quickly.
Same.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me. Personal preference. It wasn't for me.
Yeah, same here.
I'm the only one that uses Mac computers, but like everybody in my family uses iPhones, and I had a Pixel forever, and so like I was constantly the enemy of the family because they couldn't like group text me without it like breaking something, like. So they were like, get rid of the stupid phone. So my wife was always complaining, like my kids were complaining, And then like, I have my Mac, and they're like, "What is wrong with you? Like, how do you have an Android phone and a Mac computer? Like,
Very
what kind of
comfortably. I
monster
did
are
that for
you?"
years.
I
I
No,
will
it's
give
awesome.
them. I'm going to give them some serious credit for iMessage and the fact that they, they'll do the sending of the images in like full resolution, and they don't. Yeah, I use Signal too, actually.
I use Signal quite a bit because of the
Yep.
privacy incident.
Yep.
You know,
Signal is my favorite. But yeah, so I will give them credit for that. Like the fact that you can send and receive images at full resolution is very, very nice. I don't know. Other than that, it's not for me. No, no shame in the game though. If you enjoy it, and that's what you love, then that's what you love. Let people enjoy things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I basically bounce out of my Mac into like a Linux box somewhere, and I do everything that I do work-wise is in a Linux VM, either in the cloud or locally on my machine that I've just got spinning up because
I have my main Linux box down here. It's my faithful box, and then I have my Windows box I use for work, and then WSL for this kind of stuff, and then my hypervisor up there. And so lots of different stuff.
I used Ubuntu forever until it pissed me off when they went to Unity, and like Unity pissed me off something fierce, man. I mean, like it pissed me off so bad I went back to Windows. I was like, I'm done with it. I'm not gonna use this.
I don't
And then I ended up
like
going with Fedora.
Unity, but the thing about Linux is you can make it whatever you want. So
yeah,
I was like, okay, no big
yeah.
deal.
It was a reaction. I was upset. They hurt my feelings, and I was all up in my feelings for a couple of days. Then I went back to Windows, and then I was like, all right, you know what? Windows isn't for me either. Let me just try. And that's when I tried Fedora, and I've been using Fedora pretty much ever since.
Yeah. I started using Fedora. I used Linux Mint for years.
Occasionally.
Yeah, I used OS X for a real long time too. Like, don't get me wrong, like for a long time it actually was what I wanted to use. Some of the more recent operating systems and they got like really like they got stricter about some of their opinions and stuff. I'm just like, I can't with this. But oh wow, there we go. This is my childhood.
Oh my god.
Here we are.
And then this is surprisingly playable on this too. This is like running a full operating system with an app. Running, the animation is surprisingly good on this too. I was like, pull this up. I was like, you know what? I didn't expect this to run well, but this is running like a fully blown like machine, like a full blown like VM to run an operating system, then to have it run a game on top of that, and then stream the game back. And my CPU is not even like ramping up in the background here, so it's playing pretty well. So, surprisingly usable. I was like expecting this to be like slow as molasses, but the mouse tracking is not the best, but the usability is actually pretty decent. And then everybody's favorite game in the world.
Oh my god, yes.
Yes.
The biggest time waster in all of time. Someone did a study once on like how many billions of dollars have been wasted on solitaire, and it was insane. It was like in the billions of dollars. Microsoft killed productivity for corporate America when they included solitaire with Windows.
Between this and Minesweeper, right?
Yeah, Minesweeper is what I was about to say. Minesweeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I installed all the games from this, so
I loved playing Hearts. I would play Hearts and Minesweeper.
Yeah.
Especially like if I was homesick from school for any reason, like this is what I did with my day.
Yeah, I was like, you can. It surprisingly runs like this operating system well, and so like as an experiment, not on this, I didn't do one for this demo, but the I took a web app, like a ASP.NET Classic web app, and put it on IIS on Windows Server 2008, and did the same thing, and then configured the networking stack from Kimu to talk to that, and then proxied it all the way down and pulled it all the way back up, and had an app running in a VM, running a web app in a container on Kubernetes on Azure. It was so much. It's like app inception, right? It's just it's just so many layers. But it worked. It was surprisingly usable. I was like, kind of like, wow, okay. I wasn't like,
what is happening?
And wait, it was like click, and it was like, oh, I got a response back in a reasonable amount of time. But again, it's old operating systems that ran on like junk back in the day. So we're our machines now are infinitely faster. So it's just like, it was kind of that way. So that's my last demo, but it's
I remember
I wonder if, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, just talking about the hardware. Like, I remember when like 512 megs of RAM was like a really big deal, right? We needed, like, you wanted to play World of Warcraft, and then you needed to have that. So like, I did that because I wanted to play World of Warcraft, not at the PC cafe. Do they even have PC cafes anymore?
I don't think so. I don't think
it's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big deal. Like, I lived abroad for a while, and it was like that was the place to go to play games. Man, I spent, I don't know, I say a lot of time, but I went to the internet cafes to play all these pirated games on like pirated copies of Windows in this little smoke filled room in the middle of this side street in Asia. Right.
That's the life, right? Like, these are the stories. I mean, these are the nerd adventure stories, I feel like, a little bit, but you know what? They're still just as good as the non-nerd adventure stories.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just different life, right? But well, I mean, the IT malls there in Asia were like, I mean, gosh, it's like if you couldn't find it in those IT malls, the part didn't exist. I mean, that's the way I was, it just was, they had everything in those malls.
Yeah.
Every esoteric combination of any part you could think of, just it was there, and it was like 10 stories of nothing but PC components. I mean, really?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
It's like when I go to Micro Center now, I'm like, I freak out. I'm like a little kid in like a toy store, like I feel like my 4-year-old son. Well, he's not 4 anymore, but like we'd go to Toys R Us back in the day, and he would just like beeline as soon as we walked in the door. Every time I walk into like Micro Center or like any place like that, I'm pretty much like, oh my god, hold me back.
Yeah. So yeah, this has been a really fun trip down memory lane with all these different systems, XP games on XP. You saw DOS, we saw old console games, and I mean that's just a sampling. You could of course run who knows what. I mean the stacks out there, just build it for whatever you want and make it run. It'll work on this whatever game you like. I mean I've tried all different combinations of different things. I put Windows 98, Windows XP, FreeBSD, Mac OS. What else did I stuff in there?
All the things, really. It's like all the things. A little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. So it's been containerized probably at some point. So yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right. So we are top of the hour. Jonny mentioned he's got a hard stop, but I need him to do the outro because I'm terrible at it.
Yep. I have one question, and I'll do the outro. So I can do it. Have you ever tried installing like this, like the Verse tools or the Vert tools from like the KVM project?
Yeah.
You know how like in your XP machine you had like the mouse tracking thing that was weird. I wonder if you installed like the Vert tools for XP inside your container, inside your VM, inside the container. If that helps. I did that for.
I had to do that for my 2008 implementation, and I had to do. No, or was it? Yeah, I think it was the 2008 implementation, or one of them. I did. I had to install the Vert tools in the OS to make the tracking work, and there were some other tweaks I had to do to it to make it work better too, because like keyboard mappings weren't always authentic, so you had to figure that out. And then sometimes of the mouse tracking and the Vert tools was one fix for one problem at some point along the line. If you use containers in privilege mode, you can also hook into KVM and use the hardware assisted virtualization, because everything we just saw was binary translation, running through a binary translation layer, and that's why I was able to do the x86 emulation in user mode, because it's just doing binary translation, but that adds a ton of overhead and it's really slow. But for old operating systems, that's usually not a problem. So
awesome. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. This was awesome. I had a great time.
Yeah,
this was absolutely fantastic. We're going to be back in, I don't even remember what we're back in 2 weeks with. I think it's MMOs in the cloud is the topic. I gotta go refresh myself. I'm in the clouds today. But anyway, Blaize, thank you so much for coming. Audience, we will see you in 2 weeks. Jonny, I'm sorry that you're going to be late to your meeting. Until the next time, choose your technical debt wisely, and we'll catch you later.
absolutely. See ya.
Yeah.